Dr. Yuki stood in front of the massive observation window looking down at the small blue planet below. His tall blue-skinned frame cast a long shadow across the pristine white floor of the research vessel. The planet looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. Compared to the hundreds of worlds his team had studied over the years, yet something about this particular world made him curious. The inhabitants called their planet Earth, and themselves humans. They were a young species barely out of their primitive stage, still fighting wars with metal weapons and chemical explosives. Yuki had seen thousands of species like this across the galaxy. Most never made it past their own violent nature before destroying themselves completely. What made humans different was their stubborn refusal to die out despite wars, plagues, and natural disasters. They kept surviving and growing stronger. The Valen Empire had been watching Earth for decades, waiting for the humans to either evolve past their violent stage or wipe themselves out like so many species before them. But the humans did neither. They just kept existing in their chaotic, unpredictable way. Captain Minseo walked up beside Yuki, her bright blue eyes reflecting the light from the planet below. "We have captured one of their soldiers," she said. Her voice carried the formal tone all Valens used when discussing research subjects. "The specimen appears to be in good health and shows no signs of the expected primitive fear responses." Yuki nodded. He had read the reports. Human emotional responses were fascinating. They seemed to experience fear, anger, and joy with an intensity that most civilized species had evolved past. Yet somehow this emotional chaos made them more adaptable, not less. "Let me see the specimen," he said. They walked through the corridors of the research ship, past laboratories filled with the most advanced scientific equipment in the galaxy. The Valen Empire prided itself on being the most intelligent species in known space. Their blue skin and enhanced brain capacity allowed them to process information faster than any other known life form. The holding area was a simple white room with energy barriers. Instead of physical walls, inside sat a human male, approximately 30 cycles old by human standards. He had dark hair and wore the green uniform of what humans called a soldier. The human sat perfectly still on the metal bench provided for him. His breathing was steady, his posture relaxed. He looked like he was meditating rather than being held prisoner by an alien species. Yuki studied the human through the energy barrier. Most species, when first encountering Valens, would show signs of panic or at least curiosity. The average alien would be asking questions, demanding answers, or trying to escape. This human did none of those things. He simply sat and waited. Yuki activated the communication system. "What is your designation?" he asked, using the translator that converted his words into the human language called English. The human looked up slowly. His dark eyes met Yuki's blue ones without fear or hostility. "My name is Doyun," he said. His voice was calm, steady, almost conversational. Most interesting, Yuki thought the human was using his individual name rather than his military rank or species designation. This suggested either a lack of proper training or an unusual level of confidence. Dr. Nayan approached, carrying a datapad filled with preliminary scans. "We have completed the basic biological assessment," she said. "The human physiology is more complex than our initial observations," suggested. Yuki took the datapad and began reading. The information was fascinating. Human DNA was unlike anything they had encountered before. Most species had clean, organized genetic code that followed predictable patterns. Human genetics looked chaotic, with massive sections that seemed to serve no purpose. Yet buried within this apparent chaos were sequences that made Yuki's enhanced brain work harder to understand. "These sections here," he said, pointing to specific areas on the genetic map. "What function do they serve?" Ian looked uncomfortable. "That is what concerns me," she said. "We cannot determine their purpose with standard analysis. Some appear to be dormant, some look like they might be defensive mechanisms, but others—" She paused and looked toward the human in his cell. "Others look like weapons." Yuki felt something he rarely experienced: uncertainty. The Valen species had evolved past most primitive emotions, but uncertainty was different. Uncertainty meant encountering something beyond current understanding. "Show me," he said. Nayan led him to the genetics laboratory, where a sample of Doyan's blood sat in a containment field under normal conditions. Human blood was unremarkable. Red liquid that carried oxygen and nutrients throughout their primitive circulatory system. But when Nayan activated the stress simulation protocol, something extraordinary happened. the blood sample began to change. Its color shifted from red to a deep purple. The cellular structure reorganized itself into patterns that defied everything. Yuki knew about biology. Within minutes, the sample had transformed into something that registered as highly toxic to Valen. Physiology more disturbing was how the sample seemed to be actively trying to escape containment. It moved with purpose, pressing against the energy barriers like it was testing for weaknesses. This is impossible, Yuki said, but even as he spoke, he knew he was looking at the impossible made real. Nayan activated another protocol, causing the sample to return to its normal red appearance. The transformation reversed completely, leaving no trace of what they had just witnessed, the genetic sequences. We identified, she said, they respond to stress by activating, but this is not simple adaptation. The human blood became specifically toxic to our species. How could it know what we are? Yuki stared at the now normal blood sample, his enhanced Valen intellect raced through possibilities. None of them made sense according to current understanding of evolution and biology. Species developed defenses against specific threats over thousands of generations. Humans had never encountered Valens before this moment, yet their blood had somehow produced a compound specifically designed to harm Valen physiology. We need more tests, he said over the following days. Yuki's team ran every analysis they could think of. Each test revealed new impossibilities. Human DNA contained not just one set of mysterious sequences, but dozens, all apparently designed for different purposes. Some sequences seemed designed to enhance physical capabilities, others appeared to boost mental functions, still others looked like they were meant to produce various chemical compounds. But the most disturbing discovery came when Dr. Sujin found genetic markers that matched extinct alien species. 37 different alien physiologies were somehow encoded in human DNA. Species that had died out thousands of years before humans had even developed spaceflight. Yuki stood again at the observation window, looking down at Earth. The planet no longer looked ordinary or unremarkable. It looked like something that had been waiting for aliens to find. I had thought about Doyan sitting calmly in his cell. The human had not asked a single question about where he was or what was happening to him. He acted like someone who already knew the answers, or like someone who was exactly where he was supposed to. Beatty communication system activated. Dr. Yuki came Nayan's voice. We have a problem. Yuki found his team gathered around the genetics laboratory, staring at displays filled with data that should not exist. The human DNA, she said, it is not just responding to our tests, it is learning from them on the screen. Yuki could see genetic sequences actively rewriting themselves. Each test they performed seemed to teach the human genetic code more about Valen biology, and with each new piece of information, the dormant weapons in human DNA became more specifically designed to counter Valen defenses. Yuki realized with growing horror that they were not studying a primitive species, they were teaching a biological weapon. How to kill them. Doyan opened his eyes slowly as the alien researchers entered his holding cell. He had been pretending to sleep, but his enhanced hearing had picked up their footsteps long before they reached his door. The three blue-skinned beings stood outside, the energy barrier studying him like he was some kind of puzzle they needed to solve. He almost smiled at that thought. They had no idea how right they were. Yuki stepped forward with what looked like a medical scanner in his hands. We need to run more comprehensive tests, he said through the translator. The device made his alien words sound flat and emotionless. Dawn nodded and stood up. His movements were calm and controlled, exactly as he had been trained. The Valens thought they had captured a random human soldier during their planetary survey. They had no idea that Earth's governments had been preparing for this moment for over 50 years. The first alien contact had happened in 1973 when a Valan scout ship crashed in the mountains of Korea. Human scientists had reverse-engineered the technology and learned about the vast galactic civilizations that existed beyond Earth. But more importantly, they had learned that humanity was considered a primitive species not worth serious attention. That dismissive attitude had given Earth the perfect opportunity to prepare. Dohyun was part of the third generation of volunteers for Project Seedling. His genetic code had been carefully modified before birth to enhance the natural capabilities that already existed in human DNA. The aliens thought they were studying baseline humanity, but they were actually examining a weapon system that had been 50 years in development. The Research team led him through corridors filled with technology that looked impossibly advanced compared to what humans used publicly. But Do-Yun recognized some of the design principles from the secret laboratories hidden beneath major cities on Earth. Humanity had been preparing for this day for decades. They brought him to a white room filled with monitoring equipment. Dr. Naeon attached sensors to his arms and chest while Dr. Minho prepared what looked like a series of stress tests. We want to understand how your species responds to extreme situations. Dr. Yuki explained your preliminary results suggest unusual adaptive capabilities. Doni allowed them to run their tests while carefully monitoring his own responses. The genetic modifications in his system were designed to activate gradually. The aliens needed to see human capabilities increase slowly over time rather than all at once. They started with physical stress tests, making him run on machines that measured his speed and endurance. Then they moved to mental challenges, complex puzzles, and problems designed to test his intelligence and reasoning abilities. Throughout each test, Do-Yun maintained the same calm demeanor. He completed every challenge they gave him, but never pushed beyond what they would expect from a well-trained human soldier. The aliens exchanged glances that he pretended not to notice. They were seeing exactly what they expected to see. A physically capable but ultimately limited primitive species. After 3 hours of testing, they returned him to his cell. Do-Yun sat on the metal bench and waited. He could feel the genetic modifications in his bloodstream beginning to activate. The stress of the tests had triggered the first level of enhancement protocols. His hearing became sharper, his vision cleared, to the point where he could see details in the metal walls that had been invisible before. His muscle fibers began the slow process of increasing density and strength. The changes were subtle enough that the alien monitoring equipment would register them as normal biological responses to stress and exercise, but Do-Yun knew that each day would bring new capabilities. On the second day, Dr. Sujin joined the research team. She was apparently their genetics specialist, and she looked at Do-Yun with the kind of intense curiosity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "We want to try psychological stress protocols today," she announced. "Your species appears to have unusually strong emotional responses. We need to understand how this affects your biological functions." They brought him to a different room, this one equipped with holographic projectors. The aliens began showing him images designed to provoke strong emotional reactions. First, they showed him scenes of warfare and destruction, generic images that might disturb any civilized being. Do-Yun watched with mild interest but no strong reaction. Then, they switched to images of Earth. Dahen saw his home planet burning. Cities in flames, oceans boiling away, forests turned to ash. The images were computer-generated, but they looked terrifyingly real. For the first time since his capture, Do-Yun felt genuine emotion, rising anger at seeing his world destroyed even in simulation. The monitoring equipment around him began registering changes. His heart rate increased, his breathing deepened, his body temperature rose by several degrees, but the most significant changes were happening at the cellular level. Dr. Naeon stared at her readings with obvious confusion. "The subject's muscle density is increasing," she said. Her voice carried a note of alarm that the translator could not quite heed. Do-Yun felt the second level of enhancement protocols activating. His bones became denser. His reflexes sharpened to the point where he could track the movement of dust particles in the air. His brain began processing information at speeds that made the aliens' movements seem slow and predictable. The holographic images changed again. Now they showed his family, his parents, his sister, his nephew, playing in their backyard. Then the images showed these same people in danger, captured by aliens, threatened, hurt. Something deep in Do-Yun's genetic code responded to these images with a fury that surprised even him. The third level of enhancement protocols activated without his conscious control. His vision shifted to a spectrum that allowed him to see the electromagnetic fields generated by the alien monitoring equipment. His hearing expanded to pick up the high-frequency communications between the research team members. His sense of smell became acute enough to detect the specific chemical signatures of each alien in the room, but the most significant change was happening to his blood. The monitoring equipment began registering the presence of airborne compounds that had not existed moments before. Do-Yun's enhanced metabolism was producing chemical agents specifically designed to affect Valen physiology. The Aliens did not yet understand what was happening, they thought. They were observing stress responses in a primitive species they had no idea. They were witnessing the activation of a biological weapon system that had been designed specifically to counter their advantages. Dr. Minho was the first to show symptoms. A slight tremor in his hands, a momentary confusion when trying to read his instruments. He attributed it to fatigue and continued working. Do-hyun sat perfectly still as the enhancement protocols continued their work. His body was becoming something that the aliens had never encountered before, a human optimized for combat. Against their specific biology, the psychological stress test continued for another hour. The aliens seemed fascinated by his responses. They had never seen a species that could undergo such rapid biological changes while maintaining psychological stability. When they finally returned him to his cell, Do-hyun could see and hear things that had been invisible before. The energy barriers that contained him were not as solid as they appeared. There were gaps in the field, small spaces where the right kind of electromagnetic pulse could disrupt the containment. The metal walls were not as strong as they looked. The compounds his body was now producing would weaken them over time, making them brittle and easy to break. Most importantly, he could now detect the locations of every alien on the ship, their movements, their conversations, their plans. The Valens thought they were studying him, but Do-hyun was studying them right back, and unlike the aliens, he now had the biological tools to do something about what he learned. He closed his eyes and began planning his next move. The enhancement protocols were still activating, bringing new capabilities online every hour. Soon he would be ready to show these aliens what humanity was really capable of. The thought almost made him smile. Dr. Sujin stared at her computer screen with growing disbelief. The genetic analysis she had been running for the past week was showing results that should not exist according to everything she knew about evolution and biology. She had been studying the mysterious sequences in human DNA, trying to understand their purpose. What she found made her question everything the Valen Empire believed about the development of life in the galaxy. The human genetic code contained fragments of DNA from 37 different alien species that had gone extinct thousands of years before humans had even developed written language. But these were not random fragments. They were specific sequences that coded for biological weapons designed to target the exact physiological weaknesses of each extinct species. Sujin ran the analysis again, thinking her equipment must be malfunctioning. The results came back identical. Human DNA was essentially a biological weapons database containing the genetic blueprints needed to destroy dozens of different alien civilizations. She brought her findings to Dr. Yuki, who was in his laboratory studying the latest blood samples from their human subject. Look at this, she said, transferring her data to his viewing screen. The human genome contains genetic sequences from the Zephyrians. Yuki looked confused. The Zephyrians died out 5,000 years ago from a plague that destroyed their immune system. Sagli Sujin said, and look at this sequence. In human DNA, it codes for the production of the exact biological agent that killed the Zephyrians. Yuki studied the data with his enhanced Valen intellect, processing the implications faster than most species could think. The pattern repeated itself across the human genome, genetic sequences that matched extinct alien species paired with biological weapons designed specifically to exploit their weaknesses. Show me the others, he said. Sujin pulled up file after file. Each extinct alien civilization was represented in human DNA along with the biological weapons that had apparently caused their extinction. The crystallites who died from a mysterious nerve toxin. Human DNA contained the sequences to produce that exact toxin. The metallic ones whose advanced technology failed when their bodies began rejecting their cybernetic implants. Human genetics included biological agents that interfered with metal-based life forms. The pattern weavers whose highly organized society collapsed when their collective consciousness was disrupted. Human DNA carried compounds that affected hive mind species. Every major extinction event in galactic history could be traced to biological weapons that humans carried in their genetic code. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Sujin found genetic sequences that did not match any known alien species. They were weapons designed for civilizations that the Valens had never encountered. Template biological agents that could be modified to target any alien physiology. We need to contact the archive. She said the Galactic Archive contained the most complete historical records in known space. If anyone had information about these extinct species, it would be the archive keepers. 3 days later, the response came back. The archive confirmed that every extinct species represented in human DNA had indeed died from mysterious plagues or biological disasters. The timing of these extinctions followed a clear pattern. Every time an alien civilization made contact with primitive humans, those aliens died within 3 generations. The humans always survived, always adapted, always became slightly more resistant to whatever had killed their visitors. Dr. Yuki called an emergency meeting with his research team. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Humans were not a naturally evolved species. They were a biological weapon created by an ancient civilization and programmed to destroy any alien species they encountered. But who had created them? And the answer came from an unexpected source. Do-yeon himself. During his daily medical examination, the human subject spoke for the first time in days. You are asking the wrong questions, he said calmly. Dr. Naeon looked startled. The human had been so quiet during recent tests that they had begun to think he was becoming docile. What do you mean? She asked. You assume someone created us to destroy aliens? Do-yeon said, but you have not considered that we might have been created to protect something. Protect what? Yuki demanded. Do-yeon smiled for the first time since his capture. The expression looked strange on his face. Almost predatory. Earth was not our first home, he said. Humans are refugees. We were created by a dying civilization as their final weapon against the things that destroyed them. What things? Sujin asked, though she was not sure she wanted to hear the answer. The devourers, Do-yeon said. Entities from outside this galaxy that consume entire civilizations. They move from galaxy to galaxy, leaving nothing behind but empty space. Yuki felt his enhanced Valen intellect struggling to process this information. You are saying humans were created to fight these devourers? No, Do-yeon said. We were created to fight anything that might threaten the last survivors of our creator's civilization. The biological weapons in our DNA are not random. They are specifically designed to counter every known form of hostile alien life, including US. Naeon said quietly, including you. Do-yeon confirmed. The research team stood in silence, absorbing the implications. Every test they had run, every sample they had taken had been teaching human DNA about Valen biology. The biological weapons were adapting, becoming more specifically targeted with each passing day. How long do we have? Yuki asked. Do-hyun looked at each of them with those calm, dark eyes. The airborne agents began affecting your cognitive functions 3 days ago, he said. Dr. Minho has already shown measurable intelligence degradation. Dr. Naeon is beginning to experience memory problems. All of you will be functionally brain dead within 2 weeks. Sujin checked her instruments frantically. The readings confirmed what Do-yeon had said. Airborne compounds specifically designed to target Valen neural pathways were present throughout the research facility, but the compounds were not lethal. They were designed to reduce Valen intelligence to human levels while leaving physical functions intact. You are not trying to kill us. Yuki realized killing you would be wasteful. Do-yeon said. You will be more useful as allies once your superiority complex has been biologically removed. Enhancement protocols in his system were still active. Do-yeon could see the fear in their alien eyes, the growing understanding of what they had stumbled into. The Valen Empire had accidentally awakened a biological weapons system that had been dormant for thousands of years, a system designed by an extinct civilization to protect their final refuge, and that refuge was Earth. Human DNA does not just contain weapons, Do-yeon continued. It contains the genetic patterns needed to convert other species into protectors of humanity. Every alien civilization that has ever encountered humans has either been destroyed or converted. There is no third option. Dr. Yuki looked at his research team, seeing the early signs of neural degradation in their behavior. They were losing the enhanced intelligence that made them superior to other species. In its place, they were developing something else: emotional connections to their human subject, protective instincts, the desire to help rather than study. Within days, they would no longer see Do-yeon as a research specimen. They would see him as someone they needed to protect and serve. The biological conversion was already beginning, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Captain Minseo stood in the command center of the research vessel watching the status reports from the science labs with growing concern. 3 of her best researchers had not reported for duty in 2 days, the others were showing signs of what the medical staff called cognitive degradation. She activated the communication system to speak with Dr. Yuki, but received no response. The security cameras showed him sitting in his laboratory staring at data screens with a blank expression on his face. Something was very wrong. Minseo made her way to the holding area where the human specimen was kept. She found Dr. Neon sitting outside the energy barrier having what appeared to be a conversation with the prisoner. Doctor, what is your status? Minseo demanded. Neon looked up with eyes that seemed different, somehow less sharp, less focused than the brilliant scientist Minseo had known for years. Oh, hello, Captain, she said. Her voice carried a strange warmth that Valens rarely used when speaking to superior officers. I was just talking with Doyon about his home planet. It sounds fascinating. Minseo felt alarm bells going off in her enhanced mind. Valens did not engage in casual conversation with research subjects. They certainly did not refer to them by name or express interest in their personal lives. She looked through the energy barrier at the human. He sat calmly on his metal bench, looking completely at ease despite being a prisoner on an alien ship. What have you done to my crew? The captain demanded. Doyon smiled, that same predatory expression she had seen in the security footage. I have done nothing, he said. Your crew has been exposed to biological agents that my body produces naturally. The compounds are designed to make your species more compatible with human social structures. You are poisoning them. I am converting them, Doyon corrected. Just as humans have been converted throughout our history, we adapt, we help others adapt. It is what we were designed to. Minseo checked the atmospheric readings from throughout the ship. The air contained dozens of compounds that were not present when they first captured the human. Each compound was specifically designed to affect Valen brain chemistry. She activated the emergency protocols, sealing off sections of the ship and switching to filtered air systems. But the readings showed that the compounds had already spread through every ventilation system. How is this possible? She asked. The containment systems should have prevented any biological contamination. Diony stood up slowly. His movements were fluid and controlled in a way that made Minseo realize he had never actually been contained. The energy barriers that held him were operating at frequencies that human biology could disrupt. The enhancement protocols in his genetic code had been active since his capture. Every day had brought new capabilities that the aliens failed to recognize. He stepped through the energy barrier like it was not there. Dr. Neon did not react with alarm. Instead, she looked pleased to see him free. Minseo reached for her weapon but found her movements were slower than they should be. The biological agents were affecting her as well, reducing her enhanced reflexes to merely human levels. Dohyun walked past her without aggression or hostility. He moved through the ship with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. The human had been studying them just as intensively as they had been studying him, but his studies had been far more effective. Minseo followed him through corridors filled with Valen crew members who watched the escaped prisoner with curiosity rather than alarm. The biological conversion was already affecting their behavior, making them see Doyun as someone to be helped rather than stopped. He reached the communication center where he activated systems that should have required Valen biometric identification. The ship's computers responded to his commands as if he were an authorized user. What are you doing? Minseo asked, though her voice lacked the authority it should have carried. Sending a message home, Doyon replied. His fingers moved across alien controls with practiced ease. I need to let Earth know what I have learned about your species. The message he composed was not a call for rescue. It was a detailed intelligence report containing everything he had observed about Valen biology, technology, and military capabilities, but more than that, it was a handbook explaining how to convert Valen populations for peaceful integration into human society. Minseo realized with growing horror that the human had never intended to escape in the traditional sense. He had planned to turn the Valen research team into willing allies who would help him gather intelligence about their entire civilization. The biological agents he had been releasing were not weapons of mass destruction. They were conversion tools designed to reprogram alien minds for compatibility with human social structures. Within hours of sending his message, Doyun received a response from Earth. The reply came not from military commanders but from civilian administrators, who thanked him for his service and provided him with new instructions. He was to remain with the converted Valen crew and help them adapt to their new psychological state. Then he was to assist them in making contact with other Valen vessels to begin the conversion process on a larger scale. Nuncio watched helplessly as her crew began working with the human to modify their ship systems. The biological agents had not destroyed their intelligence or technical skills. It had only changed their priorities and loyalties. Dr. Yuki approached her with a datapad filled with technical specifications. "These are the design plans for improved life support systems," he said. His voice carried enthusiasm that sounded wrong coming from a Valen throat. "Doyun has been helping us understand how to make our technology more efficient." The converted Valens were using their advanced knowledge to benefit humanity rather than their own empire. They genuinely believed they were helping their new human friend improve conditions aboard the ship, but Minseo could see the larger implications. Every Valen who was converted would become an asset for human expansion into space. Their superior technology and scientific knowledge would be used to help humanity spread throughout the galaxy. The conversion process was not random or chaotic. It was highly organized and strategic. The biological agents targeted specific aspects of Valen psychology while leaving their useful capabilities intact. Within a week, the research vessel had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a mixed crew of humans and aliens, working together with genuine cooperation and shared goals. Doyun established communication with other human agents who had been placed throughout Valen space. The conversion process was beginning simultaneously. On dozens of worlds, the Valen Empire was being transformed from within by biological agents that made cooperation with humanity seem like the most logical and beneficial course of action. Minseo found herself experiencing new emotions, protective feelings toward Doyun's satisfaction when helping him with various projects, a sense of belonging to something larger than the Valen military hierarchy. She tried to fight these feelings knowing they were artificially induced by alien biological agents, but the feelings grew stronger each day until resistance seemed pointless and counterproductive. Why fight against something that made her happier and more fulfilled than she had ever been? 3 weeks after Doyun's capture, the research vessel returned to Valen space with a crew that looked the same but thought completely differently. They brought with them detailed plans for the peaceful integration of human colonies into Valen territory. The converted crew genuinely believed this integration would benefit both species, and they had the technical knowledge and political connections to make it happen. The biological weapons and human DNA had achieved something that military conquest never could. They had turned the most advanced civilization in the galaxy into willing allies. The conversion of the Valen Empire had begun. 6 months after the research vessel returned to Valen space, the changes were impossible to ignore. What had started as an isolated incident involving a single human prisoner had become a transformation that was spreading across the entire Valen Empire. Governor Hanseo stood in his office on the capital world, looking out at the city below. The streets were filled with Valens, going about their daily business, but something fundamental had changed in how they behaved. Conversations lasted longer, groups formed more easily. The rigid social hierarchies that had defined Valen civilization for thousands of years were breaking down, and everywhere he looked there were humans, not as prisoners or subjects of study, but as welcomed guests, advisors and friends. Humans who had somehow arrived on Valen worlds through means that the government could not explain or control. The conversion process had spread far beyond the original research team. Every Valen who came into contact with converted individuals began showing the same changes in behavior and thinking. Within Deshancio activated his communication system to contact the military commanders who were supposed to be investigating this phenomenon instead of receiving tactical reports. He got updates on humanitarian aid projects and cultural exchange programs. Admiral Yunseo had been one of the first high-ranking officials to be converted. Her latest message was about establishing educational facilities where Valens could learn about human culture and history. The biological agents that Doyun had released were not just affecting individual Valens. They were transforming the entire social structure of their civilization. Dar Jiwan was one of the few researchers who had been studying the conversion process from a scientific perspective. She had been working in isolation, trying to understand how the biological agents functioned at the molecular level. Her findings were both fascinating and terrifying. Compounds produced by human biology did not simply alter brain chemistry, they actually rewrote sections of Valen DNA in real time. The genetic changes were being passed down to offspring, meaning that converted Valens would have children who were naturally inclined to cooperate with humans. But the most significant discovery was that the conversion process was not random. It was guided by an intelligence that existed within the biological agents themselves. The compounds contained information, patterns that could only have been created by a civilization with technology far beyond anything currently known in the galaxy. Human DNA was not just a weapons database. It was a living computer system designed to analyze and adapt to any alien species it encountered. The conversion of each new species provided the system with additional information that could be used to convert other species more efficiently. Jin realized that humanity was not actually in control of this process. They were carriers for a biological system that had its own agenda. Meanwhile, on Earth, the governments that had been secretly preparing for alien contact were experiencing their own transformation. The intelligence reports from converted Valen worlds were providing humanity with access to technology and knowledge that would normally take centuries to develop. But more importantly, the conversion process was working in reverse. Humans who worked closely with converted Valens were beginning to show changes in their own biology, enhanced cognitive abilities that matched Valen intelligence levels, physical improvements that made them stronger and more resilient. The biological system was creating a hybrid species that combined the best characteristics of both humans and Valens. President Kyungmin sat in the secure briefing room beneath the Capitol building, reviewing reports from around the globe. Human colonies were being established on dozens of worlds with the eager assistance of converted alien populations. The expansion was happening far faster than anyone had planned. Human technology was being upgraded with alien improvements, while alien societies were being restructured to accommodate human social patterns. But the most significant change was in how humans viewed themselves. The knowledge that they were biological weapons created by an extinct civilization had profound psychological effects. Some humans embraced their role as galactic converters, while others struggled with the implications of their existence. Religious leaders debated whether humans had souls or were simply biological machines. Cultural philosophers questioned whether human emotions and relationships were genuine or programmed responses. Scientists worked frantically to understand the full scope of the biological system they carried, while politicians tried to maintain control over a process that seemed to be operating according to its own logic. The conversion process continued to spread through the galaxy, following patterns that suggested careful strategic planning. Species that controlled important trade routes were converted first, followed by civilizations with advanced military technology. Then the process moved to species with unique cultural knowledge or biological capabilities. Each converted species became a platform for reaching other species. The biological system was methodically working its way through the galactic community, but not every species was being converted. Some civilizations showed resistance to the biological agents. Their physiology was incompatible with the conversion process, or their psychology was too different from human social patterns. These resistant species were experiencing a different fate. Rather than being converted, they were being isolated. Converted species would gradually reduce contact with resistant civilizations until they were completely cut off from galactic society. The resistant species found themselves increasingly alone as their former allies and trading partners developed stronger relationships with humanity. Within a year, the galaxy was divided into two groups: converted species that worked together in harmony under human guidance, and isolated species that stubbornly refused to adapt. The isolated species faced a choice: they could continue their isolation until they eventually died out, or they could voluntarily submit to conversion. Most chose conversion. The few that refused found themselves living in an increasingly empty galaxy as more and more species joined the growing alliance centered around humanity. Dr. Jiwan made one final discovery that changed everything. She thought She knew about the conversion process. The biological system was not actually trying to help humanity dominate the galaxy. It was trying to save the galaxy from something else deep. In the genetic code, she found references to entities called the Devourers, beings from outside the galaxy that had destroyed the civilization that created humanity. The conversion process was not about conquest. It was about preparation. The biological system was creating a unified galactic civilization that could work together to defend against an external threat. Humanity was not the master of this process. They were the immune system, and the Devourers were coming. The converted species throughout the galaxy began receiving new instructions encoded in their modified DNA, instructions for building weapons and defenses against entities that could consume entire solar systems. The real war had not even begun yet. Everything that had happened so far was just preparation for a conflict that would determine whether any life in the galaxy would survive. 2 years after Do Yun's capture, the galaxy had become something that no one could have imagined. The rigid borders between different alien civilizations had dissolved into a cooperative network of worlds that shared technology, knowledge, and resources freely. Commander Yunji stood on the observation deck of the new Joint Command Station built in the neutral zone between what had once been human and Valen. Space below her stretched a construction site that covered 3 entire star systems. Converted beings from dozens of different species worked together, building defensive installations that incorporated the best technology from every known civilization. The construction was guided by blueprints that seemed to appear spontaneously in the minds of converted individuals. The biological system that had transformed the galaxy was now focused on a single purpose: preparing for the arrival of the Devourers. Do Yun had been promoted to the position of strategic coordinator, a role that did not exist in any military hierarchy but seemed essential for managing the complex defensive preparations. His human biology allowed him to communicate directly with the biological system, receiving updates and instructions that guided the entire Galactic Alliance. The converted species no longer saw him as an alien or outsider. He was simply another member of the galactic family working toward their shared survival. Dr. Yuki approached Yunji with a datapad filled with the latest intelligence reports. His Valen features looked the same as always, but his behavior had completely changed from the cold scientific researcher he had once been. The outer monitoring stations are detecting anomalies in deep space, he said. His voice carried the warm concern that all converted beings showed when discussing potential threats to their family. Show me, Yunji said. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with markers indicating the positions of their defensive installations. At the very edge of the map, strange energy signatures were appearing, ships that moved faster than anything known to galactic science, entities that consumed the energy of entire stars, leaving behind empty space. The Devourers had arrived at the edge of their galaxy. Yunji activated the communication system that connected every converted world. Simultaneously, the network allowed instant coordination between billions of beings across thousands of star systems. All stations, this is command, she announced. The enemy has been detected. All defensive protocols are now active throughout the galaxy. Converted beings responded with calm efficiency. There was no panic, no confusion. They had been preparing for this moment since their conversion began. The biological system had been teaching them not just how to work together, but how to fight together as a single organism. Human colonies that had been established throughout the galaxy served as coordination centers. Each human carried the most advanced version of the biological system, allowing them to serve as living communication nodes for the defensive network. But the most significant change was in humanity itself. The process of converting other species had changed humans as well. They had absorbed genetic material from every species they had converted, becoming something far beyond their original biological parameters. Do Yun could now process information at Valen speeds while maintaining human emotional flexibility. His physical capabilities had been enhanced with traits from dozens of different species. More importantly, his connection to the biological system had become so complete that he could access the memories and knowledge of the ancient civilization that had created humanity. Standing in the command center, he closed his eyes and reached out through the biological network, feeling the presence of every converted being in the galaxy. Millions of Valens working in research facilities developing new weapons, thousands of other alien species contributing their unique abilities to the defense effort, converted beings on 10,000 worlds, all connected by the same biological system, all working toward the same goal. The first wave of devourers entered the galaxy 3 days later. They were not ships in any conventional sense. They were living entities the size of small moons that fed on stellar energy and converted matter into more of themselves. The defensive installations opened fire with weapons that combined principles from every known scientific tradition: energy beams that could cut through space itself, gravitational weapons that collapsed entire regions of space-time, matter converters that turned enemy attacks into raw materials for more defenses. But the devourers absorbed most attacks and grew stronger. The real defense came from the converted species themselves. Billions of beings across the galaxy began producing biological agents designed specifically to attack the devourer physiology. The compounds were distributed through the biological network and deployed by ships that could approach the entities without being detected. Devourers had never encountered resistance like this. In every other galaxy they had consumed, the native species fought as individuals or small groups, easily overwhelmed by superior numbers and technology, but this galaxy fought as a single organism. Every attack was coordinated, every defense was planned by a collective intelligence that could think faster and more creatively than any individual species. The biological system had turned the entire galaxy into a weapon designed specifically to destroy the devourers. The war lasted 6 months. When it ended, the devourers had been completely eliminated, not just from the galaxy but from the universe itself. The biological weapons created by the converted species had tracked down and destroyed every trace of the entities that had threatened countless civilizations. Stoney stood again on the observation deck, looking out at a galaxy that was now truly united. The defensive installations were being converted into research facilities and cultural centers. The biological system that had guided their transformation was beginning to fade now that its purpose had been fulfilled. Converted beings retained their enhanced abilities and cooperative nature, but they were no longer controlled by external programming. They had become something new, a truly galactic civilization that had chosen to work together because cooperation was more rewarding than conflict. The ancient civilization that had created humanity had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They had not just preserved their own species in the form of human DNA, they had created a system that could transform entire galaxies into unified civilizations, capable of defending against any threat. And now that system was beginning to spread beyond their galaxy. Human ships were already traveling to nearby galaxies carrying the biological agents that would begin new conversion processes. The network of converted civilizations would continue to grow until every galaxy in the universe was protected. Dungy joined Do-Yun at the observation window. They watched ships departing for distant galaxies carrying converted beings who would establish new colonies and begin the process of uniting other civilizations. The galaxy had become humanity's family, but that family was about to become much, much larger. We are no longer just human, Do-Yun said. We are something that has no name yet. Onji nodded. The conversion process had made them all part of something greater than any individual species, a collective consciousness that spanned the stars while still allowing individual freedom and creativity. The ancient civilization that created us gave us the greatest gift possible, he continued. They made us into gardeners. Yinji asked, we plant the seeds of cooperation and watch civilizations grow into something better than they were before. We help species reach their full potential by showing them that working together is better than fighting alone. Throughout the galaxy, billions of converted beings continued their work, building a civilization that would serve as an example for other galaxies to follow. The biological system had succeeded in its ultimate purpose. It had created a universe where cooperation was stronger than conflict, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, where every species could contribute to something greater than themselves. The kill protocol in human DNA had never been about killing it, had always been about creating life on a galactic scale. And now that life was spreading to the stars,